Next, we have item 3 on the agenda, Americans with Disabilities Act, Beach Access Feasibility Study and Trail Connectivity to Tamarack State Beach Feasibility Study.
And I'll introduce Traffic and Mobility Manager,
Thank you, Chairman Gokin, Vice Chair Johnson, members of the Commission. Before you for this item is the Americans with Disability Act Beach Access Feasibility Study and Trail Connectivity to Tamarack State Beach Feasibility Study. Oops. All right, there we go. So first off, just a summary of our recommendations. This is a multi-part recommendation. So first, in regards to the ADA, thank you, John. First, in regards to the ADA Beach Access Feasibility Study, recommend support approval to City Council of 2 alternatives. The first at north of Pine, the second at Tamarack State Beach. The second part is trail connectivity to Tamarack State Beach. Support approval of City Council of the cut and cover tunnel option. So this item includes consideration of alternatives for 2 separate but coordinated feasibility studies improving access to Carlsbad State Beach. I'll begin my presentation with an overview of the ADA Beach Access Study, which is intended to evaluate the feasibility of constructing ADA accessible ramps to the beach. This feasibility study was led by the Transportation and Public Works Department. The second phase would be taking a look at the trail connectivity to Tamarack State Beach, which evaluates options for a connection between the North Shore Agua Hedionda Trail and Tamarack State Beach via pedestrian walkway, tunnel, or at-grade crossing. That study was led by the Parks Department. For this presentation, I'll provide you with an overview summary of the feasibility analysis and then an outline of the preferred alternatives for each of these 2 projects. So firstly, we will review the ADA Beach Access Study, which includes the project area located along Carlsbad Boulevard from the parking lot just north of Pine Avenue to the Coldwater Inlet Bridge south of Tamarack Avenue at the Agua Hedionda Lagoon. So the project area includes an entire length of about 4,200 lineal feet. Existing pedestrian access along this area is provided via 6 stairways and 2 ramps down to the beach from Carlsbad Boulevard. The slopes of the 2 ramps, the 2 existing ramps at Pine and Tamarack Avenues, exceed the allowable slopes defined by ADA and the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines. So the project's main objective is to evaluate the feasibility of constructing 1 or more ADA access ramps and to develop up to 2 preferred design alternatives for this connection between Carlsbad Boulevard and the beach. So this exhibit here, this provides an overview of the project study area. On the top section there, starting at number 1, this is the area at Pine Avenue, and then extends all the way down to Tamarack State Beach and Agua Hedionda. The blue boxes there, those provide the daily pedestrian volumes, and this was conducted during the summer on a Saturday, August 11th, 2018. So as you can see, the highest pedestrian volumes were observed at Pine Avenue with about 5,700 pedestrians that day. Second highest came in at the location at Tamarack Beach. And that came in at 5,200 approximately pedestrians for the day. That includes pedestrians accessing Tamarack State Beach from both the stairway and the access road down to the beach. A few additional items to point out on this figure are, if you see the yellow circles there, those are the 5 potential locations that the study evaluated for ADA access ramps. So number 1 is the location north of Pine Avenue, 2 is at Pine Avenue, 3 is Cherry Avenue, 4 is at the Tamarack Avenue restrooms, and 5 is that portion south of Tamarack Avenue. So one of the primary constraints of this study was looking at landform alteration. Landform alteration is a significant environmental concern, and this concern is recognized in the California Coastal Act. So landform alteration often leads to loss of habitat, erosion, runoff, and water quality degradation. Once the landform alteration has occurred, it is difficult, if not impossible, for an engineered area to replicate all the functions of that unaltered area. Landform alteration in steep slope areas can have far more impact than in low relief areas. Thank you. Continuing with landform alteration constraints, development in the steep areas often proposes vast amounts of landform alteration to make the area safe and buildable, and efforts to minimize landform alteration often conflict with various codes and standards for fire, building safeties, as well as development and design use. So I'll just show you a few pictures here, just kind of showing some of those constraints there. What this picture shows is that area between the bluff and the lower seawall. On that left picture there, you can see the existing slopes, the vegetations, and the seawalls. So these were all things that needed to be considered as we developed the concepts for the ADA access pass. Again, in regards to shoreline protection, another key feature, and all structures would need to be designed to be above the elevation of the lower protective seawall, which would protect the ramps from storm damage and sea level rise influence. So moving on to the ADA beach access design alternatives. So the feasibility study was really initiated with a series of community input meetings. So this included both stakeholder meetings and pop-up events. So the stakeholder meetings were guided by a group of local residents, consisted mainly of wheelchair users and Carlsbad Village residents. The pop-up events, so these were events that were held at the beach. They were located at Pine Avenue and Tamarack beach locations, and they were held during the summer hours to really catch a good crowd there. The community consensus that was obtained as part of this process was that Pine Avenue was the preferred location and Tamarack Avenue would be the second location if the city were to construct two ramps. The reason for this consensus was because of the close proximity to the village and compared to other locations further to the south. So for the engineering evaluation, the 5 alternatives were all filtered through this process. This set of 10 criterion here was what was used to evaluate each of those alternatives. And this is listed in order of weight. So usage and demand held the highest weight amongst all of the different criteria, whereas biological, geotechnical were a lesser weight in the evaluation process. So through this evaluation process, the top 2 preferred alternatives were identified. The locations north of Pine Avenue scored the highest, and the location at Tamarack Avenue scored the second highest overall, and both were selected as the preferred alternative for potential CIP implementation. So Pine Avenue scored the highest across all criteria and was consistent with the messages which we've heard during the public outreach process. The only real mark against this location was its vulnerability at the lower end at the ramp, because this area is not currently protected. However, the existing riprap could be potentially reconfigured, stacked up to provide better protection at that landing area. The Tamarack Avenue restroom was the second highest overall. This is similar to Pine Avenue as it was highly well utilized, as we saw in the pedestrian counts, and it was also highly supported during the stakeholders and community during the outreach process. So the Pine Avenue ADA ramp, a brief description of what's being proposed as part of this concept. The ramp and pathway would begin at the parking lot north of the intersection of Pine and Carlsbad Boulevard. It would be approximately 400 feet in length, 8 feet wide, and would extend within the bluff area. The ramp would be designed with an incline of 7.8%, and it would allow us to maintain all of the existing facilities in this area as they are now, except for the existing showers which would need to be relocated closer to the existing restroom area at the ramp landing area. Also, as mentioned before, the existing riprap would then need to be reconfigured at the base to provide better protection for storm events. This is a photo simulation of the Pine Avenue ramp. As you can see, it's starting at the parking lot area at the top of the bluff and landing at the existing restroom area and riprap there towards the bottom of the ramps. Second preferred location is the ramp at Tamarack State Beach, where the ADA ramp would be approximately 200 feet in length and begin at the top of the bluff near the existing facilities, near the shower, plaza, restroom areas there. It would then extend southward, parallel to the existing access road, which would remain the same. A portion of this ramp, about 60%, would be elevated along the bluff, ranging between 2 to 5 feet above that existing bluff line. This design, similar to the first alternative, utilizes existing access points and is limited to disturbed area to the extent possible in order to minimize any impacts to the previously undisturbed areas. And here is a photo simulation of the Tamarack Beach access ramps, showing the position of the ramps between Tamarack Beach Access Road and the seawall walking path. Note that the existing staircase at the restroom area would need to be reconstructed. However, much of the remaining infrastructure is maintained as is. This slide sheet here shows a cut sheet of some of the proposed design character that would be utilized as part of the ramps. As you can see, we would be going with metal railings, and then it also provides some details in regards to lighting that would light the path down to the beach. Also, some structural elements are provided here as well. So that concludes the summary of the ADA access ramps. Now we'll move on to the second study, the trail connectivity to Tamarack State Beach feasibility study. So this slide here shows the project location. A and B are the locations of the ADA access ramps. C is the location of the Tamarack Trail connection. It's located at the Coldwater Inlet Bridge on Carlsbad Avenue, south of Tamarack Avenue. This project would provide a connection from Tamarack State Beach to the North Shore Agua Hedionda Lagoon Trail that runs along the north side of the lagoon. The Agua Hedionda Trail currently terminates at the north side of the bridge. If you go to that box C, so just above that box, where a steep pathway then leads up to the east side of Carlsbad Boulevard there. That's how trail users currently get to the beach. To the lagoon trail. In the existing, there is no connection between the trail and Tamarack State Beach, so people using the trail who want to access the beach must climb the steep dirt trail at the terminus of Agua Hedionda Lagoon, walk uphill approximately 700 feet along the east side of Carlsbad Boulevard, and then cross at the intersection of Carlsbad Boulevard and Tamarack Avenue. So it's a very circuitous route that they have to get to the beach right now. There's no direct access from that Agua Hedionda trail. So this current route makes for a difficult connection between these important natural resources. So the goals of the trail connectivity to Tamarack Beach, first is to evaluate the feasibility of constructing a tunnel undercrossing to connect the North Shore Lagoon Trail to Tamarack State Beach. And then the second would be to develop up to a preferred alternative for the connection between the North Shore Lagoon Trail to Tamarack State Beach. So for the feasibility study, multiple alternatives were considered to provide this trail connection. We've got 5 of them listed here. There was a pedestrian bridge, an open walkway, a walled tunnel, and then a cut and cover tunnel, which was the recommended option. Just a note on why the cut and cover tunnel was determined by the project team to be the most feasible is that, similar to the tunnel alternative, this option would be underneath Carlsbad Boulevard. However, the trench requires much less excavation, as essentially what the name is alluding to. It is a cut and cover tunnel where we would cut away the roadway and essentially a preformed tunnel would be dropped under Carlsbad Boulevard. The construction would be fairly quick, but the key element of that is it only requires 12 inches of clearance from the top of that tunnel to the bottom of the bridge, whereas as a constructed tunnel would require about 9 feet of clearance. So with this cut and cover tunnel, there's much less clearance required between the tunnel and the bottom of the roadway. So this figure here shows the site plan of the cut and cover tunnel alternative. This would include a single cell precast reinforced concrete box culvert crossing just north of Carlsbad Boulevard Bridge. This design would include a new ADA compliant connection to the eastern side sidewalk on Carlsbad Boulevard to the Agua Hedionda Trail. For flood control, a 4-foot berm is proposed to keep water out of the structure, and gates could also be added to each end of the tunnel. And this would be, for one, to control access to the tunnel during flood events, and also serve as a barrier to prevent sand, dirt, debris entering the tunnel when it's needed. This graphic here shows the connection of the tunnel to Tamarack State Beach parking lot. So on the western side of the tunnel, an ADA compliant concrete walkway will connect to the existing parking lot. The parking lot will be reconfigured to provide a 4-foot wide ADA path of travel along the western edge of the parking lot to the existing parking lot. The parking lot would then be restriped to accommodate the proposed ADA path of travel while maintaining the existing number of parking stalls and the minimum drive aisle widths. Here's a photo simulation of what that cut and cover tunnel option would look like. So next steps for both feasibility studies are to present and provide concept plans to commissions and eventually City Council. So that would occur during the winter of 2020. We're scheduled to go to City Council in March. After that, solicit engineering, environmental, and design firms for engineering design in spring of 2020. Then complete the engineering and environmental studies in spring of 2021. Summary of our recommendations. First, for the ADA beach access feasibility study are to support approval to City Council of the 2 alternatives identified in the staff report, those being the first, the location north of Pine, second, the location at Tamarack State Beach. For the trail connectivity to Tamarack State Beach feasibility study, support approval to City Council of the cut and cover tunnel option. With that concludes our report. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Perez.
I have 2 parts on this, but I'll start off with, so we don't go back and forth with the beach access. So the Tamarack location, I think that's great. I really think it's a nice design, especially being a former triathlete running up and down that incline is pretty big. Just a question on that design. At the end part where it connects to the parking lot, is there a will there be like a blockade so that there's no rolling down onto the parking lot? And the reason why I say that is just because in the past, looking at that part where it goes, the connection from Carlsbad from the parking lot, I've seen a lot of parents, wheelchairs or mobile units going down that really high incline and just going right through it and blowing through. So I'm just kind of wondering if there's going to be any barricades on that.
There would be some type of treatment along the edge lines of the pathway. And again, remember the whole intention of the ADA path improvement is to provide a much gradualer slope as you're going down to the beach. So there would be less slope than is on the current pathway now and road now.
Understood on that. It's just also too that the movement from up above where the bathrooms are to come down. Yeah. It would have to go down and around.
Yes.
So that would be of a concern. That's just one thing that I've seen.
Okay.
And then the second part on that, over by Pine Street and the parking lot. So just to understand, these ramps are around 2.8 million apiece.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
That's right.
Again, the design is, I like that. Was there any information to the pop-up team or to the citizens about, this may sound stupid, but possibly is a cost of an elevator or like some kind of beautified elevator for, shorter, quicker connection to the path?
Yeah, that was not considered as part of that project. No one did bring that up during the public outreach process. So it was not evaluated as part of.
No cost analysis or anything?
No,
Okay.
an elevator was not considered.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Lincoln?
So the Tamarack ramp currently is a 9.9% slope, is that correct?
That's correct.
And I don't think you ever stated it, but what is the ADA allowable slope? And you said there was some other standard, some design standard, are they the same, or is it like, I looked something up and it was like 1/12 or something, which would be 8.3%, is that seem correct?
Yes.
So if anything, the Tamarack one is pretty close to the allowable standards, so it's 9.9% versus 8.3%, but the Pine Avenue was 15.6, which is really quite steep.
Mhm.
So I guess the question is, if we have $3 million projects here, I don't think we have unlimited funds, and it's probably maybe out of our lane to be deciding on budget, but if the city council is concerned about budget, and I'm sure there's many other projects around the city that would love to have $3 million to make improvements, is there some sort of priority list that these types of projects are on that the city council looks at to say, okay, this is the priority?
These have all been identified in the CIP, so they have been funded within the CIP as well. In terms of prioritization on the CIP list, I don't know if you have any idea on how that would be done. Sorry to.
So to me, if I were to order these in ranked order, I would put the Pine Avenue as the highest because you're going from a 15.6% slope down to, to meet the minimum. And then the Tamarack is almost there already, but you would just be lowering the slope a little bit. And then the lowest one, which I guess is my next question is going to be that tunnel. What is the demand? So we have pedestrian numbers for how many people are going down the Pine Avenue Tamarack at 500 in peak hour, something like that. But I don't know what the demand is to come from the Lagoon Trail to go through a tunnel. And again, are there 3 people that want to do that, or are there 1,000 people? And if there's only 10 people, they could probably walk up the bank and then cross the street and go down the ramp you're making, or the ramp that's already there. So that $3 million project is what I put that probably at the lowest. And if we were recommending to the city council, probably, I don't know, I would say we should recommend a rank order or something.
So with regards to the prioritization, until about a year ago, we did not have a scoring matrix within the city. It was usually given by the city council with regards to fund this project, or through the annual CIP budget development process is when they would approve the projects. So what was mentioned earlier is that these projects have already been funded. They are within the CIP. So it's usually in the time that it goes through the different phases. Are we going through the environmental? Are we going through the planning, the design? And then now we'll be going into the construction phase for some of the things. That's usually the process that it would go. And there isn't a ranking, if you will, of the various projects as we take a look at them. That's usually done during the CIP budget development process, which usually presented in the May timeframe and then approved by City Council in June. So that's the normal process that we have. Something that we instituted last year is internally, each of the asset managing departments, so these are city staff, will take a look at what are some of the projects that we've been given as far as either public input or because of condition of something or a master plan requirement or the different projects. We took a look at developing a scoring matrix that we use internally to say this project should be higher than this one or comparable with regards to the priorities that staff are working on. And so that's something that we did present it to council last year, gave them a heads up that there was a scoring matrix, but it is something that is relatively new. But once council has decided that they want to fund this project and we move forward with it. If there is something, and they did this last year, Councilmember Hamilton, you might remember, said, you know what, the barrio lighting and the traffic circles, Village and Barrio, pull that up, it's already been funded, pull that up ahead of all the other projects that staff might be working on. City Council voted on that, and then that got elevated. So when there are some specific projects that they call out, then if it's voted on by City Council, those would be prioritized.
And was there any public outreach or counts done to see what the potential usage would be for the tunnel under the street? I agree. I think I agree with Brandon and probably everybody that these are all nice projects and we'd love to have them done, but given the cost benefit, what's that?
Yeah, we did not do counts of trail users.
Or public outreach on what the potential usage might be of people going under through that tunnel versus just going over.
Right, nothing in regards to the degree of use. Public outreach was all favorable for the cut and cover tunnel option, but that was it.
So I do remember that there were discussions, as Nathan mentioned earlier, with regards to those who are in the disabled community with regards to preference. And as I recall, that there were some participants that were in favor and were asked with regards to this proposal. But as far as getting the data on how many people will use it, what is the demand, if you will, and things along those lines, I don't believe that was done.
Right, that was not done.
But the City Council is committed to doing all three of these projects as priorities for them already?
That's correct, yes.
There was a question about slope, and maybe if it wasn't apparent, slope is just one of the aspects, and then landings is another. So I don't know if you can see that I don't want to steal your thunder if you want to go to that and explain why the ramp's so much longer. It's not just the slope that we're dealing with, but also landings at reasonable stops.
Yeah, so you can kind of see that on the photo simulation, as it's a series of slopes, and then there's a landing, and then a slope is a landing. So that's really kind of why that extended length was required.
Okay. Commissioner Fowler.
So this is featured as the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act beach access. There's no legal, somebody hasn't sued us to require this yet, have they? This is just.
Yeah, no one has sued us. Right.
Yeah. Is there a perception that there is a risk that we will be sued at some point for not providing ADA compliant access to this? Was that part of the rationale?
I don't think that it was ever part of the rationale for the project. It was essentially just to improve access to the beach for all users.
Is there a reason why we have two and not just one? Yeah. Because I thought when you presented it to us, I thought we were choosing one.
Right. Well, yeah, there's definitely two that we're recommending that City Council would be evaluating, and it's the distance is probably the primary reason that we're recommending these two, the distance between the two. And then, of course, looking at the usage, it just made sense given the volumes that we were seeing to have the two locations.
Okay.
Just as a final, so the cost of these things are, in my sort of way of thinking are enormous, regardless of what they are. And I think the problem with saying that $3 million is an awful lot of money, yeah, it's $500,000 for the El Camino Real College seems really high to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm not looking at the cost of all projects in the CIP. So, I think that's something that I don't think that's something that we can really effectively analyze as such. I think that's a very difficult one. So, it all seems like a ton of money to me. But on the other hand, it does seem like we don't spend enough money. That's just my opinion on things.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's.
Commissioner Pensier, do you have any comments, question?
One of the things that you mentioned in the Cotton Tunnel is that there's going to be a skylight in the median, I assume. I've seen lots of car parts come off of vehicles, lug nuts and things like that. Is there some kind of protection to keep people from getting hit on the head by the stuff that goes down there? Do you know what that's supposed to look like?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know what kind of protection would be provided. It would be recessed below the existing rail on the tunnel, so there would be some protection there, but that's something we could look at doing, just to provide some type of barrier or some type of fencing, something, just to provide more protection for the tunnel.
Okay. The trail beyond the Cotton Tunnel is basically a dirt sand trail and so on. Are there any plans at some point to improve that, to connect to the neighborhoods so that they wouldn't have to use Tamarack to access the beach?
Sorry, to improve the actual trail itself, or?
The dirt part of the trail, there are connections that go up to the neighborhood that's.
Oh, right, to provide better access into the neighborhood.
Was that part of the thought process here, is just provided and?
That was not part of this project, no. Yeah.
But that option would exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see the advantage of, fewer pedestrians having to cross at Tamarack, which creates, anytime you push the pedestrian push button there, the light stays red for traffic a long time.
Right.
To let people walk across. So if they have another way to get across, which doesn't require that, that's going to improve the level of service for the vehicles there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, reduce the potential for crashes that involve the pedestrian. So I see that as a huge safety improvement as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Any other questions?
just to add to Pete's comments, that we are working on the city's sustainable mobility plan, and that would be a good opportunity to look at some of these type of access improvements, enhancements, to make those greater connections to the trail network. So that's a good thought and something that we will consider.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hunter.
For the cut and drop portion, you say you're going to cut through the boulevard
Yeah.
and drop the tunnel down there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how long does the boulevard get shut down for you to cut?
Yeah, I had this same question because I was wondering about that as well. And the engineers.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah, the engineers state that it would take a weekend. And it's something that's done fairly quickly since everything's prefabricated and they're essentially dropping the tunnel in. It's similar to the tunnel at Swami's, so in Encinitas. They went through a very similar process. That was also cut and cover. So it's something that could be built fairly quickly. It would create some temporary impacts to Carlsbad Boulevard, but it's something that's
So shut down for a weekend
yes.
on the boulevard?
Yeah, approximately a weekend.
With no flow through at all?
They could do it kind of side by side, so they could do southbound and then northbound, so potentially just cutting down one side of Carlsbad Boulevard.
Because I know we shut down Carlsbad Boulevard for other reasons, and particularly the bikers come up, and there really is no way.
Yeah, other than
Yeah, you gotta go all the way out to El Camino Real to get north. So it's it's not as big a deal for a car, but if you're biking and you're trying to bike down the deal, you're pretty well hammered. But if it, you know, you guys have figured that out, I was just curious, I don't know if it was 2 months or
Actually,
something.
there are ways to get around it. Just not that far inland either,
Okay.
so.
Okay, any other
You can show me that.
questions, Vice Chair Johnson? Yes, would this project require coastal commission approval?
Yes, and we are reviewing this project with Coastal Commission concurrently. And we've nearly wrapped up that review. I think we have one last round of kind of comments to go through with them.
And if you propose 2 ramps right now, if you only, because of the cost,
Yes.
would the city be happy with 1? Because what you said earlier, I understand that pine slant is excessive,
Mhm.
but is that a problem if you only get approval for 1 ramp?
That would be up to city councils. That would be their decision to make.
Thank you.
On the tunnel, I would have liked to seen pedestrian counts, because I walk down there, or walk the boulevard, and there's not that many people on the pedestrian side. So to have a $3 million tunnel versus walking 700 feet,
Mhm.
that seems excessive, but
Okay.
that's all. Okay? Any other questions?
No, but I'd just like to make a comment on that. I think that one of the reasons that you don't see a lot of people down there is because of the restrictions that we currently have. So it's kind of like, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
We went hiking down there a few months ago, and there were a lot of people who used that dirt trail. And, at that time, it was right after it rained, and the thing was, you had to climb over a lot of sand to get there. Still, people were down there. They walked their dogs down there. They come down those steep dirt trails from the neighborhoods that were all cut up. It's used a lot, and with very little improvement, it could be used a lot more. So, I'd really like to see
Commissioner
this.
Perez has a question.
Yeah, I think if you can go back to the Tamarack view for this cutout, yeah.
You
I
talking about?
think, just being a person that cycles, I think it's the actual Google picture.
Oh,
Yeah, so
sorry.
for me, there has been a lot of times that part where the cut and cover tunnel will be, and before that, there's Tamarack. Cyclists, anyone, runners, there's joggers, there's people with strollers that are using that westbound lane going against traffic or through traffic, and it's a crush. I mean, there's just a lot of congestion going on. So I think this is a great design to have that ADA ramp, but then also have this cutout. And I think with Commissioner Pensier and Johnson, is that for me, I think it would open really the east side of the park, and so that you can have this connection, so that you can have a cycle to go all the way up to Cannon
Mhm.
and back around, and hopefully, if we can have some studies to see if people that are running on the bike lane, people that are using their strollers on the bike lane, can just use that parking lot, go under and through. I think this would be a great thing, and especially seeing someone coming across and me holding onto my brakes and going into the lanes and almost getting hit by a car. I think this is, it's really worth it for the future. The one question that I have for this is the cut up to get to Carlsbad Boulevard from the trail, the existing trail. What will the incline, what will the slope be? Is that going to be 9%? Will it be at 5%? And I guess what I'm getting at is right there when you're exiting off of that that ramp,
Yeah.
you're going to be perpendicular to Carlsbad Boulevard, and a person on a bike, a person running might just overshoot that and come flying right into oncoming traffic. So I guess my request would be to have some kind of barrier, no pedestrian crossing, or something just to kind of break up that open T-space right there.
Yeah, I'm looking into your question in regards to the slope up to Carlsbad Boulevard from the east side of the trail.
Correct.
I don't see it here.
It would meet ADA.
Yeah, it would meet ADA standards.
You have just a-
Yeah. So the reason why I say that is right now, when you're going up that trail, it's a very dirt, beaten path.
Mhm.
It's a very high cut, but if we go from I don't know anything from a high incline, which really repels any bicyclist just going right through, down to like a lower set standard of ADA, there is a risk that someone can just go right through that and just hop right onto the Carlsbad Boulevard. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
like a barrier,
Yeah.
pedestrian barrier. Like that.
Yeah,
there-
yeah,
So, just a comment.
okay.
Okay, are we ready to vote?
One more question, and it might be to you or to John. There was discussions about fixing the bridge, particularly on the west side for pedestrian and restriping it. We've got the barrier stuff that's there. Would this be done in conjunction at the same time as you're ripping the bridge apart and things to kind of fix that west side?
I know that there were some previous discussions with the park department considering whether or not this project could be somehow combined with the proposed Tamarack Avenue improvements, including the Carlsbad Boulevard widening. So I think those conversations are still ongoing to see whether or not we could minimize construction impacts as much as possible. So that conversation has started.
Okay, well, that was widening the bridge, but there was some things about just trying to fix that western side of the bridge, because everybody's trying to run,
Yeah.
into Commissioner Perez's deal. Everybody's on the west side, they're running their strollers, they're all out in traffic because you get the slow people that are on the sidewalk, and so we discussed, how to make them safer in previous years on how to do that. So I didn't know if the bridge part seems pretty easy, so I didn't know if that could be, that was wrapped in.
But you're
And the
not
whole Tamarack
widening.
thing too is great.
Yeah,
but-
there is a project to propose improvements at Carlsbad Boulevard and Tamarack, which would extend to that west side sidewalk across the lagoon to make it wider so that
You're
pedestrians.
widening the sidewalk, but they're narrowing the lanes. You're going from
Right.
2 lane to 1. They're not widening the
Right.
bridge.
Well, we hope they're not gonna go to one, but.
Well, that's what they're gonna do.
It would be the restriping based on that lane reduction,
They're not
proposed
widening
lane
the
reduction.
bridge.
It's like-
Narrowing us.
And removal of the guardrail to put, there's ways that you can make up that space.
Yep. Okay.
I have another question. Your open walkway was not considered a viable walkway because of ocean events, as you call it.
Yeah,
Don't you have that same concern for ocean events for the tunnel?
we would, there still would need to be temporary closures with ocean events, really probably, under any type of treatment there. With the open walkway, there were some additional feedbacks in regards to hydraulics, also just in terms of the amount of runoff that it would generated, and then also in regards to it required deeper foundations for that open option, and just excavating there in that environmentally sensitive area is pretty difficult. So there were a combination of different things: hydraulics, foundations, and water runoff impacts. That would be the issue there.
I was just concerned because I attended the Coastal Rising Seas program or project, and
Mhm.
that was a great concern of trying to mitigate all the problems on the boulevard.
Hmm.
Okay, I think we drilled them enough. We're ready? Anybody wants to make a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve staff recommendations on the ADA beach access feasibility study. I don't see any priority to put into that.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, please note Commissioner Hunter made a motion and was seconded by Commissioner Hall. For sincere.
Is it just for the beach access feasibility study?
It was for all three.
So this is for all three.
Do we want to break it
would like
into,
to make a different motion.
break it into two separate motions?
It just sounded, Commissioner, that it sounded like you were just doing the ADA, not the cut through of the trail connectivity.
Can I make a recommendation that we separate the two CIPs?
Yep, I'm happy to do that, and we'll cut the first motion as just the ADA for the beach access. Does not include the tunnel for the first one.
Do I have a second for that one?
I'll second.
Okay, so first motion is to approve staff's recommendation for the ADA beach access feasibility study and without the trail connectivity. And it was seconded by Commissioner Perez. Please vote.
I'm sorry,
Do you have
let me
comments?
reset. So his motion was to separate the two.
Yes.
So we're just voting on the two ramp ones right now, not the tunnel.
Right, but don't we need to vote on that motion to separate the two?
No,
No, it was
it's
approved.
just,
I
it's
think
just,
it was an amended
it's
motion.
an amendment, I amended the
It's
motion.
a friendly amendment to
Yeah.
the motion,
Friendly
so you
amendment, okay.
throw out the
So-
original motion, and now we have an amended one.
So technically, what you said to her, okay.
And if you have a second, then we can go forward with it. Okay, so we're ready to vote on approving staff recommendation for the two ADA ramps, not the cut and cover in this motion. Okay, vote.
The transportation director requested that we get some clarity. Could you repeat the motion just to make sure that we're super
Okay,
clear?
I'll let-
We're at,
For CIP 4063, or, excuse me, yeah.
Right, so. the
6065 is the one for the ramps. That's what we're voting on now. We'll have a separate vote on 4063.
Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. So, ready to vote? Please note that the staff recommendation for CIP project 6065 passed unanimously. Okay, and now do I have a motion for the CIP project 4063?
I make a motion to move forward with the staff's recommendations for Tamarack State Beach Project, CIP number 4063.
Second.
Okay, please note that Commissioner Perez made the motion, seconded by Commissioner Quincy. Please vote.
Hold on
Hold
just a
on.
second, I'll do it. Okay, go for it.
Please note that it passed 5-1, I'm sorry, 5-2. Okay?
Could I note that I'm not opposed to the project, just I think it's a lower priority than the other one?
You can. Okay, we're ready to move on. Thank you. Thank you.
Do it up there, or you can come.
Thank you.